The client Macey that we're getting to know. I'm wondering about which part of Macey's story stands out for you.
Well, in the context of this chapter that we just wrote, I'm thinking about the kinds of information that was on the intake form. So one of the things she said on there was she was looking for someone who would do teletherapy and looking for someone who was actively putting themselves out there as culturally responsive. So I'm kind of wondering, what does she picture as culturally responsive? How does she define that? What would she be looking for in me as a therapist that would communicate to her that her needs are being met in that area? And in terms of us working virtually, how would she know that was coming across from me? And I also am kind of wondering about the whole piece of her exploring Indigenous culture and how she's making meaning of that and the connection to that to her desire for cultural responsivity in her therapist, and then the sort of parallel cultural responsivity in her workplace. So those are some of the things that are just mulling around in my mind as I read this or listen to this story.
I'm thinking in my head, is this the first time Macey is accessing therapy? Doesn't seem clear about that. And in terms of what my own lived experiences with clients that come to me who are of Asian background, there may be some stigma, attached to getting mental health support. Even in Cantonese, there's a word like, for example, Dean means you're crazy. People who are crazy would access therapy. So I'm curious about her exactly her goals for therapy, and what does she mean by a culturally responsive therapist. The thing I noticed is the language too. It sounds like since Macey came to Canada at 7 years old, being educated in Canada, English may not be an issue, but there's it sounds like some words that she'd like to share with the counselor, in the session. So that was interesting to me. So
given that you speak Cantonese, Gina, but I wouldn't speak Cantonese, what would it be like for her to work with you where she doesn't have to explain the language all of the time like she did in the video, or to work with me where she may choose to express something in Cantonese and then would have to try and wrap meaning around it in a way that may not necessarily be easy. We may not have the same sort of cultural metaphor language, easy translation into English. So that would be something to talk with her about too, from my perspective as a therapist.
mm-hmm. There's two things I caught from that. So one is even if we don't speak the client's first language, and what you said too, Sandra, we can explore it. We can sometimes, if I'm working with a client whose first language is Spanish or German, and they're about to say something in their language, I would encourage that. How would you say that in your language? What does it mean to you? To use that word or phrase. And another thing is her resiliency and her strength. Her being a minoritized, racialized woman, feeling like this is not okay, the language she hears around her, and she's speaking like it seems like she wanted to do something about that, to educate herself, to be more aware, to be more self-aware. So that's commendable. So I'm impressed by that.
And it makes me wonder about where that has come from. We have this sort of little snippet of time. So it makes me curious about her experiences before she came to Canada and since she's come to Canada, and where does that passion for social justice come from, and that strength to stand up? What's the history behind that?
Looking forward to having more of these conversations with you. So